There we go. Okay, hello everybody. Good morning if you're where I am, or good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the College and University Archives section of Society of American Archivists Spring Webinar Series. This is the third of 4 webinars we have featuring practitioners from the field. And today our topic, or I guess I should say who I am. My name is Angel Diaz. I am a curator of California Ethnic and Multicultural Archives at UC Santa Barbara, and I am College and University Archives Section Steering Committee member. Today we are going to feature 3 lovely folks talking about archiving student life on campus. And what they're going to do is talk about recording student experiences on their campus, looking at student orgs, alumni, social and cultural activities, political activism, and other key events. And they're going to discuss some of their approaches to collecting student life, including goals, specific projects, successes and challenges faced while doing this work. And the speakers we have today are Jessica Ballard. Jessica is the Archivist of Multicultural Collections and Services at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. She holds a joint master's in history and library science from Indiana University Bloomington. Jessica's work focuses on collection development, policies, and research pertaining to underrepresented groups. She is an advisory board member from Project STAND and served on STAND's Student Engagement Committee. We also have Lae'l Hughes Watkins, who's the University Archivist at the University of Maryland. As University Archivist, she is responsible for the University of Maryland collection area within Special Collections and University Archives. She is the founder of Project STAND, and research areas focus on outreach to marginalized communities, documenting student activism within disenfranchised populations, and utilizing narrative of oppressed voices within the curricula of post-secondary education spaces. And third, we have Valencia Johnson. Valencia is the Archivist for Student Life at Princeton University. In addition to being a certified artist, she holds a Bachelor of Arts in American Studies and History from the University of Kansas and a Master of Arts in Museum Studies from Baylor University. She engages with student organizations on managing and preserving their records in analog and born digital formats. So I'm going to welcome our speakers, and they're going to take it away, and then we'll have Q&A after. I'll be monitoring the chat, but we'll do Q&A after they're done with their discussion. Okay, so take it away.
So before we start our dialogue or conversation, I just want to say thank you for the invitation today, Angel, and just I'm so excited to be on this panel with Valencia and Jessica. These two are some of my most favorite people in the archives profession. I have great adoration for them and the amazing work that they do. So this is already a good day for me. So I'll start first. I would like to ask, starting with Valencia and then Jessica, can you explain your role within university archives or at your institution?
Yeah, so I'm the Archivist for Student Life, and I'm the first person to hold this position at Princeton. I work directly in the University Archives unit of the Special Collections Department, which is housed in the University Library. I have an interesting role because I'm a selector because I do the acquisitions of current student material. I'm kind of an outreach archivist because I have to build the programs in order to get the material to acquire. I'm also in technical services because I process the material that I acquire. And then I do reference for it, and also participate in our general reference rotation at Mudd Library, and try to do some interpretation in museum exhibits and stuff and make connections with campus partners all around. So I'm kind of like the extrovert archivist on my team, which is really fun. I love talking to people in very structured manner. So that's kind of how I'm in our system and how I function.
Thank you so much. But I would like to ask, like, what is some of the most favorite things as you're thinking about your role that you get to do?
Working with students. I love, they know what they want, and they know the gaps that needs to be filled in to help them reach their goals, and being able to be that facilitator is really meaningful, and making those connections with them and just being authentic with them. I've had so many conversations, all my conversations actually with student groups. The main goal isn't to acquire material, it's just to be a resource to them, and being able to do that and have the freedom to create projects on my own is really rewarding in my job. It's just, it's why I do what I do.
Thank you, Valencia. +1 on that, working with students, +1. And same questions to you, Jessica. What's your role within university archives or at your institution, and what are some of the things that stand out to you that is your favorite thing you get to do?
I am similar to Valencia. I'm the first archivist of multicultural collections and services, and my position, so I came to the U of I in 2017 as an archives resident, and then it was turned into the tenure track position that I have now, which started March 16th of last year. So I haven't quite been able to fulfill the role the way that I'd like to, but I think that's also been an interesting way to step back to really see the things that I was able to do before, especially with the level of outreach and engagement I was really starting to do with alumni. So in many ways, with taking a step back, I realized how much I miss it, but I think it also can put a lot of things into perspective of things that I was able to do, and of course, things that I would like to do more of. And I came at an interesting time because it was the U of I's sesquicentennial, and that was kind of an overwhelming but exciting way to really get acclimated. And so I had opportunities, especially to work a lot with Ellen Swain, the Student Life and Culture Archivist, on a lot of exhibit projects and attend alumni events. And that's something I especially miss, is doing the exhibits. And it's been, I think what's been most rewarding is seeing alumni, especially those pertaining to underrepresented groups, actually see themselves documented in the exhibits, to feel like they're actually a priority. And I think what's especially valuable about that is there's a decent amount of alumni who still have connections with students. So then they start sharing it with the students. And so we've had some student groups come in. We've always worked a lot with fraternities and sororities, and I think we wanted to make it known it's definitely not doing exhibits or any of our outreach is not limited to them. And so I've done a lot of trying to really work particularly with underrepresented student groups, especially to make sure that I'm a space where they should always feel welcome to bring their concerns about any privacy concerns and safety. And I think the biggest part that's been helpful with that is connecting with the cultural centers on campus, because the directors just have such a great connection, and working with them and making their organization seem like a priority makes it so much easier for them to also share that with the students.
Thank you so much for that, Jessica. Just on a personal note, I just feel like exhibitions in general are such an important tool to utilize, especially again with the communities that you and Valencia and myself are working with. It is something about seeing, like literally seeing yourself represented in a space that traditionally where you haven't been seen or represented. And so I'm glad you're doing some amazing work as well, as Valencia also mentioned. And as far as myself, as Angel mentioned, I am the University Archivist at the University of Maryland. I just got there in 2019, so I've been there for 2 years and some change. First Black woman to be in that position. And that was the same at my old gig, as well as University Archivist at Kent State University, which I think there's a certain amount of gravity that comes with that when you're taking that position on and realizing that you are the first person of color, specifically Black woman, to take on that role. One of the things that was really important to me when starting at UMD, I really wanted to, as we're talking about students, to make it very clear that my vision for university archives was to be student-centered. That does not mean we don't do all the other things that are required of our positions and still collect administrative records and work with the president's office and various different academic spaces and centers on campus. But I wanted to send a signal to students to let them know that their contributions to the evolution of our institution would be critical under my tenure in doing this work. So it's been really important for me to launch initiatives that highlight and make that vision clear, and that we start to implement that within the work at UMD. And so since that time, it's been really amazing in a lot of ways. I have never been at an institution where there's like almost 900 student orgs on campus. I'm like, oh gosh, how do we do that kind of outreach to that many student groups? And there's so many different student groups. Whatever your thing is, UMD has a student org for that, and I appreciate that. I actually think they have like a Black student astrophysicist group. They have students who like to do swing dancing. I was like, this is phenomenal. So I was like really fascinated, and the students, I had an opportunity to attend it's called a First Look Fair, when they have all the student groups come out, and you as an incoming student or what have you can go around to different tables and see if that's an org you want to join. And so UA did get a table there. And that was a really great experience. We had 200 and some students actually come up to us, and they were really interested in what University Archives was doing and what were we about, and what role do we play at our institution, and how could we work together. So that was a really important experience that I've had since starting at UMD. So I actually have the next question as well. What are some of your current phenomenal projects, all caps, phenomenal projects that y'all are doing at your institutions in Valencia? Again, I'll start with you.
I love the phenomenal part. Thank you. So I started in 2018. That's when I was hired, March of 2018. And shortly after, I launched the Amp Up Your Archives initiative, because I knew that I would need an umbrella banner to hold all the different programming that I want to do. And with my job, when I was hired, it was only a 2 to 3 year term position. And so when I created this program, I try to find partners that would last beyond the 3 years on campus to at least maybe hopefully maintain the infrastructure that I was hoping to build, and also make it easy where like students would do the submission process and try to make it a little more sustainable for the remaining staff. So I knew that I wanted to do oral histories because I was seeing our campus partners, our multicultural centers and our social justice centers doing alumni focused oral history projects. So we have an LGBTQIA oral history project that was coming out of the LGBT Center, which I was processing. I was a temp before I got this position, so I was processing that already. And our Carl Phil Center for Multicultural, it it has a long title, but it's our multicultural center on campus. They were doing Princetonians of Color, but alumni focus. And I was like, well, why don't we try to do something that's current student focus? Because I feel like there's such a difference when you have distance between your college days. And I wanted to capture the current college feel and kind of mirror what we got from our student journals and letters that we already have in the collection, but just in a format that's usable for the here and now. So I started the My Princeton Oral History project, and we were really targeting students that felt like they didn't fit in the dominant narrative of Princeton. And we didn't specify what that meant, because who are we to tell students how to feel? So it's really open as anyone who just feels left out, which can be anyone. And usually it's a lot of students because they have in their mind what a Princeton student looks like and what they do. And they put a lot of pressure on themselves, and it's easy to feel excluded in this space. And we were starting to get good traction, and then the pandemic hit, of course. But out of that, as with everyone else, was trying to figure out how to collect during the pandemic and while we were away. And so the infrastructure that I had for the My Princeton, I just changed it for the COVID and me and opened it up to the entire university community. So it wasn't just current students, it was alumni and faculty, and most importantly, staff, because I was seeing that that narrative is usually not collected in a way where we get the personal. So I wanted to make space for that. And then we have the Archives Ambassador Program, which has gone through so many changes in the 3 years, because me and my co-partner, Amanda Ferrara, part of program creating is trying new things and finding out that you can't do it and you don't have the resources to it, and retooling it and reworking it. We finally got a model where we're bringing archival material to the students. And the first one was doing a look in a deep dive of student activism within our collections and building a data set for students to use, because we saw a lot of students coming in looking for material to help with their activism now, and to give them sort of an institutional memory that was missing, because they matriculate so fast, and that, it only takes one cycle of leaders to lose years of history, which is something that we try to help mitigate with the Princeton Preserves program. It all feeds into one another. I'm very much of like building an ecosystem of things that feed into one another and support each other. So the Princeton Preserves is with, I co-partnered with the digital archivist Annalise Bertini, and who was permanent. So it was an avenue that would be sustainable. But we do one-on-one consultation with student organizations to help them do basic digital records management, to help them set up a good system. So when they do decide that they want to donate years down the road, they already have the material and they don't have to go and search through their alumni database, which is what I help them do now, and try to track down alumni and passwords and analog materials still. So sorry if I went all too long, but that's amp up your archive. That's most of it is trying to do the outreach to continue to have it in front of the students and to keep building momentum, as well as making sure that I have sustainable workflows. I'm now permanent. I transitioned to a permanent line in September of 2020. So I get to see these things continue and grow and flower, hopefully, instead of just, dying on the vine. But that's my work, amp up your archive.
Oh my gosh, you're definitely doing that. That's a lot of work. That's a lot. I'm fascinated by these data sets that you're creating. Can you speak on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I did a lot of intensive research just trying to find out where every instance of student activism or known groups were mentioned in our archives. And I got really into scripting and working. We had, at that time, we were working directly in EAD, which I don't know why we were working directly in EAD, but we've since transitioned to A-Space. But I was able to do, I was just able to run scripts over our data and extract where student activisms were mentioned, not just in name collections like the Black Justice League records, but like in the Office of the Provost and in the Office of the Dean of Undergraduate Students, and like pull out records there and put it in an Excel spreadsheet for students. So I was pointing them to where the material was, so they have an easier time of researching. And it's on the LibGuide. I think Angel put it in the chat. It's under Archives Ambassador, the student activism, and like it's just in a Google Drive with our presentation and any supporting material that we did. We did a lot of local digitization, and we also put it in there, and we were just like, you can download it and do whatever you want with it. You can add it and whatever, like you don't have to share it with us, but it's just a resource for you to use.
Oh my goodness, see, that's why I said phenomenal in all caps. I'm sure you just gave a lot of people some ideas just now. so thank you. And now passing the mantle on to Jessica, so we can also hear the phenomenal work all caps that she is doing as well.
Yes, and I have been taking notes from what Valencia just said. So yeah, my work, probably kind of similarly to all of us, I've done a little bit of everything. And what was exciting when I first started in the middle of the sesquicentennial, there was a Mapping Illinois History project, which mostly used GIS. And I specifically worked on the project on African-American student housing, which has been very helpful with connecting not only with the housing department on campus, but also connecting with the historically Black community in the Champaign-Urbana area. There's often the story told that Black students couldn't live on campus till around after World War II, and that is correct, but what's a more accurate story is that most people at the time were not permitted to live on campus, but it had a lot more to do with, if you were a person of color, where exactly could you live in the community? So it was a great collaborative project as well, because there were two people that did PhDs on this topic. And so it was very exciting when I reached out to one alumni and I was like, I'm using a lot of content from your dissertation for this digital map, which she just loved because she wrote it, she finished it around 1998. So she said, all these years later, and you're finding a creative way to use that years of research. So if any of you are working on a dissertation or have done one, that's something to consider, is people might really find a way to use your rich content into an exciting project. And so that opened up doors for us to actually present and do conferences. And it was kind of interesting because my two presenters actually said it was very hard. It was a lot harder for them to get people in the community to speak with them. And it wasn't that hard with me. And one of my colleagues said it's probably because they saw me as someone who actually came here for a job, who was going to spend some time in this community and was going to see it a little differently from a student, even though at that time they were graduate students. So it was interesting even to get some of that insight of how people will see you based on your position when you're in a college town like Champaign-Urbana. And so currently the community is actually working on a Black Heritage project. And we've only had a couple meetings, but that has been something where more community archives are thinking, or just archives in general, thinking we need to come together a little bit more as well to see how we can better support each other. And I think that's been an important thing to think of, because we try to be a little bit careful being the university archives, part of this really big institution, and to make sure that we are respecting boundaries, but we're also connecting as well. And I think what's been interesting about it is presenting this to students, because you forget how many students don't know about this important history, and that so many people walk on this campus and they have no idea about the important legacies that were created for them. And I mentioned before, and I'll try not to be too repetitive because I know I talked about some of this in the March webinar. I've been working with Bethany Anderson on, we call it the What's Your Story, on documenting COVID, which I will talk more about in depth at the Midwest Archives Conference. So I'm just going to leave it at that for now. And then I've helped out some with our oral history portal as well. And what we'd like to be able to do, but we're gonna, and if there's any suggestions, I'm open to it, is seeing if there's a way that we can have people do their own oral histories and send them to us as well. And I've had a lot more people, a lot more alumni reaching out to say, we want an oral history with you. So that's been exciting to know that people are starting to say that. And I actually, right before this call, just received a message from someone from the Latinx Alumni Association that said, we've got this history of activism in the 90s. Can we work with you? And of course, one of the first things that came to mind is, yes, I wanted to explore this history more, and then maybe we can work with Project Stand. So I'm creating work for them, but that's part of the fun of this. And then a big project that I just started on with a student is a documentation project. There's been a lot of requests on statistics about how many Asian American students were enrolled during this time period. And it's been hard to find the data. So the Vice Chancellor's Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion reached out and said, there's been a lot of questions, especially about the enrollment of Black students from the earlier years to around the 1970s, when the registrar's office kept better records. Can we do some research and actually get better data and numbers of students? Because it would just be so helpful, even for us, if we actually had a better sense, knowing that we'll probably never get the accurate numbers. And so that's been exciting, because our first university archivist, Maynard Bridgeford, started the Black Student Ex-Alumni Project in the late 60s, and he actually got a lot of pushback from administrators for doing it. So it was kind of exciting to have someone from an entity of the Chancellor's Office reach out to ask us to kind of go back to this work. And I really do appreciate, I have to give a shout out to our other Big Ten school, University of Michigan, because they've been doing some similar work. And Brian Williams has been really helpful with giving me some advice on how to carry on this project. So it's been exciting, especially my students very enthusiastic about it. And another big thing has been reviewing policies. I kind of talked about this in the March webinar, especially looking at records pertaining to student activism and recognizing that, yes, many of us have so many records pertaining to student activism and protests, but there has been, this feeling that we may need to rethink how we document some of this, especially with technologies such as facial recognition, and especially as there is becoming more interest pertaining to underrepresented groups. That means, unfortunately, sometimes there may be a little bit more need to have some extra concerns. And so Project Stand has been just very helpful in documenting the now and witness and Blackivists. And I could probably go down a list of people that I'm forgetting to say, but it's been helpful to have just that support group also to hear archivists who have very similar concerns. So we're thinking more, and I'm actually looking at drafting something for us to think more about. Where are the questions we need to ask when we're receiving these types of materials? And even within that, like a lot of collections we get, we may have to take things case by case.
Gosh, Jessica, again, that's why we put all caps on phenomenal. You're doing so much amazing and rich work. Thank you so much for sharing that. I also, just on a smaller point, just when I think about the reaching back out for that demo information, that sometimes demographics, that's we don't have all the time at our institution with enrollment for specific communities. And it's like in the past, historically, our institutions were not worried about those records and that information. And then now, because we want to have these conversations and thank, glad that we are, but it's like there's this expectation that we definitely have access to that data. And it's like, no, y'all weren't checking for that data back then. So we didn't necessarily archive it. So now you want it, and then now it's a problem. So it's just something that institutions sometimes need to be aware of, that we don't always have what you're asking for, because those, again, to the points that we've been making so far, these communities were always an area of interest. And so they are missing from our collections in some ways. So I will answer the same question as far as, and I will try to go quickly because we have so many other great points we want to make. But current projects that I'm working on, obviously Project Stand. We just got a grant this year from Mellon for $750K. It's a 3-year grant. We are looking for a Project Stand coordinator. Please apply. And this person will work with us throughout the cycle of the grant, being attached to some of the amazing work that we're doing with respect to creating workshops and 2 residencies that we will be doing to create educational resources to add to our archiving student activism toolkit. And as Jessica pointed out, we are working closely with students to hear some of their concerns with respect to documenting what is taking place with respect to contemporary movements. We've definitely had conversations on concerns about restrictions. There have been students that we have recently worked with who weren't aware that some institutions have takedown policies. And it's like, oh, I can ask you to take down something that I'm worried about as far as something identifying me or what have you, that's in your records. And it's important for students to feel empowered, and that is something that we're definitely trying to push through Project Stand, that they're aware that they have agency over their stories and how it's presented to, and that they're given that information to be able to request that and ask that if they decide to send records to their institutions. So there's some amazing collaboration going on with Project Stand, and I'm not going to belabor those too much with the time we have remaining. So my other project that I'm also excited about that is specific to UMD is Stamp Your History, and that's an initiative that I launched in the year that I started. But because of the pandemic, last fall we were supposed to officially roll out Stamp Your History, but Stamp Your History is an initiative. As I mentioned earlier, I want to be student-centered. And so that's an initiative to intentionally work with students and collect history that they are willing and wanting to send to university archives. But we're also creating workshops, and that is also in collaboration with our e-records archivist, Amy Wickner, who is phenomenal and amazing, to let them know what is university archives, what is the role of university archives, how do you archive your own content, what resources are available. And then Amy Wickner has been stepping in, or will step in as we are able to do these workshops, to talk about the preservation of their digital records, because as we know, so much content is being produced as born digital, and it's not so much the analog anymore. So we're very excited to, as school begins to have some kind of normalcy, that we'll be having opportunities to do that work with students starting in the fall or spring semester. But very excited to get to do that work and talk to students about succession planning if they don't already have an archivist or historian already in their group, although we're seeing that some student groups are thinking about this already, which gives me joy. There's some student groups that we follow, and I actually see that they have a position for historian or archivist within their student group. So I'm just excited to see that. So I will pass the mic to my friend and colleague, Valencia.
Oh, thank you. I love talking about succession planning. I don't know if we want to continue to talk about this, because I feel like we've answered this question of how we're connecting with students and alumni and campus partners, but I'll just open the floor if we wanted to add anything more to that.
But to your question, say that again, Melissa, I'm sorry.
I feel like we kind of covered how we connect with students, alumni, and campus partners, but if we wanted to be a little bit more specific, I was just going to open it up to us to do that. And if not, we can move to the next question.
I mean, I would just add to the point I kind of already made. I feel like when we do activities and events that visually, physically show the communities that we're trying to build bonds and community with, that means a lot. The fact that so many of us are doing these oral history projects and inviting these voices into our spaces and letting them have the autonomy to tell their stories and not through someone else's lens. I think that is such an important tool to build partnerships with these communities, with alumni and the student groups. So that's my 2 cents. I just wanted to further amplify.
And I'll add to, even within that, I think there's just a lot when you go into people's spaces, especially when you go to them and you sit and listen. And there was an event one time and I was a little early and I heard these alums talking about how they were concerned about all this stuff in this center's attic. And they're like, what is going on with that? I heard the archives reached out to them, but what's happening? It's just sitting there. And it was very awkward because I was sitting there thinking, I don't want it to sound like, I'm eavesdropping, but I had actually, with that director, I'd been in conversation and we'd set a date for when I was going to come and look through what needed to come to the archive. So I decided, well, I'm here. I know the answer to this. So I went up and I explained it to them. And I think what was great from it is they really opened up to me and they said, we know the archives reached out. And at the time, this center was not ready. And it didn't have anything to do with any of you personally. It had to do with some negative experiences with the university. But there's a realization, especially as alumni, that if things don't come to the archives, that could make a difference and it really could erase some history. So, then they said, well, do you have a card? Because I have all this stuff in my house that probably should come to you. And that was really exciting because to sit there and to really listen to people talk, and there were a lot of current students, and so it was a great moment to kind of mention my work and to say, let's have I welcome a conversation. And I think that's one big thing I learned from when I first came to just spending more time in these spaces is that, of course, I want to encourage people to come to the archives, but also it's important, I think, to put it in a way where people aren't feeling like you're pushing too much, but you're trying to encourage. And I think I felt a little bit more confidence at that last event, which I can't believe that was last February, and it probably wasn't even safe to be there. But knowing that I also had this tenure track position at that point that was going to start the next month, I think that also made a big difference because there was a feeling where, I could say I'm here versus I'm here for a year and then I don't know who you're working with after that.
I've had to say that to some of my student activism groups that I work with, of being like, this is how it can be now with me in this position, but I can't tell you how it's going to be when I'm gone. And that they made me cry because that's they said that they wanted to make sure that I was still here, and so they started they added my position and my name into their list of demands that they made to the university. And so it was just nice to see that I was doing a good job and that it was making an impact, because I think sometimes, at least for me, I create things and I'm like, I hope this is helpful. I hope this goes well. And then sometimes you don't always get the feedback from the community, but that was one of the things.
And that pours into, I know this kind of dovetails into one of our other questions, but I mean, that what you just said, what you both have illuminated about the issue of sustainability, right? Like this kind of work should not die just because you leave or we leave a position and decide to go somewhere else or explore something else. And so often that is the case because there's not that kind of infrastructure built into the system to necessarily say this work is vital and essential and critical. And we're still having to do these proof of concept ideas to keep a position and say this work that this person is doing is important to the unit, to the university, to the library, or what have you. And that is like such a fear. I mean, even when I left Kent, and I'm glad that some work is still, I'm seeing that it looks like it's continuing, but that was such a fear and has been a fear. Like if I leave somewhere or for whatever reason that is, like you've done so much work. Like I don't think people, unless you're actually doing the work, you don't really realize how much work it takes to get these communities to trust you. Like you just really can't understand how much you're pouring yourself into these conversations with students or with alumni from Black and Brown and Indigenous communities or LGBTQ communities and other marginalized identities. Like you don't know. And so it's heartbreaking if after you do that, there's no one there that you can point to carry that work on, because it took so much time to do that. It can take years, sometimes years.
Yeah, I felt, at least for my program, like I didn't start to gain traction until the latter half of 2019, coming into 2020. And it was in February of 2020 that I learned that my position, there was no more funding for it. And so, like, aside from the pandemic, it was just like, how do I start offloading and sunsetting these programs? And that's how I was until September, when they were like, you're permanent. And it's just like, okay. But like that was after I had to start thinking of shutting and slowing things down, but also like writing this long report about how valuable and necessary this position is, but also how valuable and necessary me in this position is. And it's just, it is a lot of pressure that I think isn't common across the field. It's in very specific instances, and mostly on BIPOC archivists, where we have this pressure of not only trying to make sure that we still have jobs because we like to be employed, but also like the positions that we're holding exist after us because we want it to grow and have more opportunities for those who are coming after us. So, yeah. Oh. So our other question is like, how do you handle restriction and donor concerns about accessibility to sensitive material? And this is getting at, I think, with giving our student donors agency over the content that they give to us.
I'll just quickly say, because I know we want to leave room for Q&A, but I'm excited that we did create a student transfer form at UMD, and that within that form, they're allowed to create or to highlight what content they want restricted and for how long they want it restricted. Because that's something that we provide opportunities for alumni or other records from other departments or offices to get to do. And so we should afford students the same opportunity to restrict material. And I know just wholesale, we don't want material that's restricted for forever or what have you. I get that, it's no point to have. But if a student's about to graduate and they have genuine concern that, yes, I was very active on campus in X group and I did a lot of direct actions, blase. And so while I'm looking for a position, starting my career after graduating, I don't want all of this, all the work that I did necessarily blasted in your digital exhibits or what have you. And so they should have that right to establish themselves after graduating if they feel that work that they did would impact or believe that it would impact them getting a position in the future. So yeah, that's something that we've implemented at UMD.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I'm starting to work on too, are forms for students. And there was one created, and we kind of have a weird thing with kind of how archives, I don't know if it's completely weird, but just with how some of the materials are seen as being a state institution and what is considered to be part of the state and what is considered state property. And so I think there was a form created a while ago, and it hasn't been fully officially used because we wanted to check with an entity in the administrator's office to make sure that it matched up and seemed to complement what we were trying to accomplish, to make sure there was some clarity. And it's been used informally, but we're thinking more and more, as we are the ones who are engaging directly with these students, that it's just worth it to just go ahead and do the form. It'd be nice to get more input from administrators on how they see it, but I think more we're just realizing, because they're working directly with us, it's important for us to also make sure we're using our best judgment, and that there's a very clear line that students, very much understand. And just like I think Lae'l said, that students should feel free to say, or anyone, if we have something online and there's some concerns about that, then we should be able to, have a good dialogue to think about, what do we need to take this down, and are there better alternatives? And even when I talked in the March webinar about the series that we had, where it was documenting Black Lives Matter, but there were very close images of students' faces, where it would have been very easy to identify them. And speaking back with the donor about it, she did acknowledge that those photos that were transferred to us did not have student consent. And so through that, we actually had a conversation about it yesterday of, we are going to put a restriction on it. For right now, you have to talk to us first, and we've decided you can come to the archives. We'll let you see it there. And because they have to fill out a reference card, and if they do use it, there is a release form that we plan to revise. It is that feeling of, at least we're having a way where we're kind of controlling that access a little bit, because there are some legitimate concerns for student safety. But what was also positive that came from that is the donor sent us this article that she wrote that talked about that movement and also tied it into the history of protests. And then she also gave us a PowerPoint presentation. So I thought that was a very positive way of having this dialogue, where the donor appreciated the transparency and also said, yeah, here's some other stuff I could send you that is probably safer for you to have, that could be easily accessed by people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have, we're moving towards having one form for the entire department that will be used for external donors and internal donors, but students have the same agency and freedom that our administrative offices do. So they are able to place restrictions on their content and access restrictions, whether it's limited to the reading room or open online. But I always try, when I have conversations, to figure out their privacy concerns, and I'm very comfortable with saying that we can't do that and you should probably keep that, or come to us in a couple of years and we can have that conversation again. Because I think sometimes we're afraid that to tell them no, because we think that we'll lose it, and that it may be a risk, but like I would rather lose it than cause harm to them, because like I think Lae'l mentioned earlier, it's very hard to rebuild trust once it's broken.
I think I'll add this, and like I said, I know we got Q&A, but I mean, there's so many things, like we just mentioned, putting these restrictions and adding that as options for students on the documentation that we share. But even with content that they are willing to share, and if we do provide alternatives, like something as simple as metadata, maybe not list all the names, give this is an event and it was held on this date, but maybe it's not necessarily necessary to put the student names associated with it if they don't want to. For those who saw the freaking phenomenal event, 2-day series put together for archiving the Black web, state authorities are going to the max to identify people if they want to. There was a situation mentioned where they said they actually was looking for something someone bought on Etsy for like a shirt or something that they had on, and looked on Etsy and like tracked the person down, their Etsy person. So people are going to the max to try to figure out, in some cases, who these activists are. And so we really need to be conscientious of that and be willing to work with students, because again, as what my colleagues have said, we don't want to bring harm to the communities that we're working with.
Yeah, so if we're ready to move on to our final two questions. So Lae'l and Valencia, what are some of the challenges you face in your job, and what are some of your successes?
Valencia, I'll let you go first.
Being just the one person whose sole job is to do this work, because I'm a finite resource. And I can't be everywhere, and I am old now than what I used to be, and I cannot hang. They have study breaks at like 11 p.m. and I'm just like, I'm in bed. So learning how to manage my energy in the different directions that I'm pulling in, and just knowing that I'm not going to make connections with every group in every academic year, but knowing like if I keep building and word of mouth, like I'll get there eventually. And just the fast pace and competing with, sorry, looking at the chat, and competing with everything else that's going on campus. The successes is when I do make those connections and I get their attention, and they're just like, wow, I'm so glad you're here. And I'm just like, thank you. Knowing that I'm making an impact on the difference is the success.
I will quickly say, yes, I wish I was old as you too, Valencia. But things that are a challenge, it is about resource, the human resource, and knowing that you can have staff or also financial support as well to do the work, and that not always being up in the air, because sometimes, you know, institutions will say, we'll go with where the trend is. Oh, okay, everybody's putting out solidarity statements after George Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud, and so let's all do this. And then like when the camera's off and nobody's talking, then it's like, okay, yeah, we could put that away and we really don't need to follow up with that. So it's really, the challenge is like, okay, if this is what you say, follow it up with support and sustainable support for the work that you're doing. And then the joys along the same lines as Valencia, just when you get the students on board, that's like all the things. that is all the things. When they're like so psyched about the archives and so psyched about preserving their stories, like that is amazing. And them being thankful for getting to make that connection with you. Like I love that.
Yeah, I think I'll say we kind of talked about this before, but definitely I think there's lots of great things that come with starting in a visiting position. And I know, especially starting as a resident, I think I had a little bit more confidence to say, I don't know anything. I have no idea what's going on. And I think that it's kind of good when you can kind of come in with that. I think what's challenging sometimes in a visiting position, though, is I don't know that you're always taught how to find people in your space that will advocate for you. And it kind of sounds like Valencia and I both kind of had those spaces. And there have been some great archives professionals. I remember Anka Voss said to me one time, are they planning on keeping you? Why don't you just ask? If it's a no, then it's a no. But if it's a maybe or a yes, you're not going to know unless you ask. So I'm very glad she gave me that advice, but I'm even more glad that I listened. because I think that that was the challenge of trying to get things done. And I think there were some things I may have rushed a little bit because I was like, I want some clear things in place in case they do try to create a position such as the one I have now. So I'm very grateful just with the way that things worked out. And one of our biggest challenges is because we staff 3 different locations. It's even a little hard sometimes for us in the archives to even always know what we're doing. And I think we do a good job of trying to communicate with each other. Sometimes we have some things where we overlap. And if things work out with our special collections building, where we'll all be together more, I think that will make a very big difference. And I think one of the biggest successes, like with exhibits, I think what makes such a big difference is, and I think we forget this a lot when we work in the archives, we have a lot of stuff that people just don't know that we have. And so that's something that I remind myself of is whatever we display, there's gonna be someone that learned something new. And I just loved when we had a photo of someone and it was the parent of someone that was working there, and she'd never seen that photo of her father. And because it was a scanned image, I just said, you know, if you find me at the end, I'll just give it to you. And just to see how moved she was. And I think that's just and that's why I say I miss this so much, because it's just moments like that that happen. And then, you know, I've had a lot of people come up and say, well, I have this. Would this be of interest as well? And so just that engagement is something that I'm looking more forward to being a part of. And I think especially what's been great with Project Stand is that there's been a lot of conversations about working with student activists. And a lot of it, though, is coming from the perspective of students. And I think that's just incredibly important, that they're really feeling like they're getting that voice. And so it is even making me think with my work, I may kind of turn things in a direction where students are hesitant. I'm thinking of directing it as, okay, well, if you don't want to give anything to us, but you want to preserve, here's some things that that you might want to consider. And if you want to reach out, I'm happy to help. Similar as Valencia said, it is a risk, but there's also that concern as well. So it's one of those things where I think it makes our jobs a little bit more complicated, but it can also, just building that trust is just so essential, as my wonderful colleagues have said. Oh, did anyone else want to go? Sorry, I thought I saw someone adjust their mic. So final question is, what are things that you all would like to see in the future?
Well, I don't know if we want, Angel, I know we're like at time, we're close to time, or aren't we?
Well, that is totally my fault. I didn't make it clear that we could go into 90 minutes, but I won't keep folks too much longer because I know folks have meetings that they have to get to and things like that. So perhaps we can kind of transition into Q&A a little bit. Is that okay?
That's
Sorry about that.
No.
There was a question earlier on, and Sarah asked Lae'l, actually, you had a specific release form that you have made for students. Is that something that you can share or that is available online?
Yes, I believe it's actually in our Archiving Student Activism Toolkit on Project Stand website. But if you shoot us an email, I can make sure you get the form. But I believe it's also on that website too.
Thank you. I believe Kate asked, do you have advice on scaling this work for a lone arranger at a small university trying to start up a sustainable student-focused collecting program and start building those connections? Like Valencia said, we're a finite resource.
Valencia, I don't know if you want to, since you mentioned that, but.
Oh, me go first? Okay, sorry. I'm putting the UMD transfer form from the Stand website. Okay, Lone Ranger. It'll take some time, but I would try to find and build relationships with your campus centers, because they have the more direct voice to the students and make them your champions, and so they can push out your message to the students. So it would be a lot of legwork in the beginning, but if you can get a well-oiled in with them, then it can just be as simple as like shooting out an email saying, can you send this out to your listservs, and stuff like that. I would say start there, and then hopefully people will come to you.
I would also quickly add that, sometimes it's also about shifting priorities, and sometimes that can be scary because it's like those priorities are likely given to you by the head of your department or by the dean of the library. So then it can really feel daunting to add something else into that mix. But I would also, if you're a lone ranger, see where you can shift your priorities and what thing you can take out to add that in so that you can dedicate more time. So it doesn't feel like this extra thing that you're doing, but something that's actually integral to your work, and make that pitch to the head of your department or to your to the dean of the library or what have you, if necessary.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if this is 100% the best advice thinking off my head. And it's interesting thinking about this because I went to a small liberal arts college for undergrad, where I didn't realize that we had an archive. And I think what could be helpful, because I've talked to some people that recently started using it, and I know one professor takes her students to the archives every so often, so that they can know about the resource, and there's some useful material that she's been able to use for her class. So it definitely brings more awareness. And I try to be very careful when I say this, but I know sometimes there are students that want experience that are willing to volunteer. And I don't know if that could be something where maybe there's some type of practicum or internship that works out where they're able to get some valuable experiences that can also go on their CV and may even help someone who might be interested in the field as well to gain that exposure.
You bring up a great point with having faculty come in and utilize the collections, because faculty could also help be advocates for those collections, especially if it's a way for the faculty members to engage their classes in those materials. So Sheridan asked kind of a similar question. I'll go ahead and ask it, and you all can decide if it's already been responded to. Any advice on ensuring sustainability of your student life collecting? In addition to being at a small university, long-term needs of our department make it a struggle to carve enough time to give this collecting the work it deserves. And we've only been able to cobble together tiny grants or nuggets of internal funding for this work.
I would piggyback actually on the statement you just made, Angel. And in addition to my earlier statement, as far as getting those ambassadors of support, like if the faculty are coming in using this collection, and then when you decide to make that pitch to your administration, you have data to utilize and say, look, we have these many faculty for this last academic year that has been using these collections. We have these many students coming into the archives and doing reference. We have these many reference requests from other community stakeholders that are wanting to access this material. When we did an exhibit on this, a year, 6 months or whatever ago, we had these many people come to visit the exhibit, or these many people have been accessing this content in our digital collection. Use what data that you can pull around you to try to create an argument for yourself so that you can get that built-in support from your institution to help with providing that sustainability. And I would say, sometimes you have to train up people that are in your space, that create some allies in your space that believe in the work that you're doing, that can help you also make that argument with you so that you're not alone and having that discussion within your space.
And I would also say what's been helpful too is I every now and then, because I think I've learned to just not be afraid to ask for things, because the worst that can be told is no. And so I was in a meeting with someone from the chancellor's office who used to be the director of a cultural center I'd been connecting with. And I made it known, we have these publications that we really want to digitize, but of course we're limited, with our staff and time. And she said, well, we have this grant opportunity that you should apply for, because I'm sure it would be, especially helpful. And so, I've gotten to the point where I think I just have no shame sometimes. And I mean, I didn't at first flat out ask, but this person knows me well enough that she knew exactly what I was hinting at. And so, and sometimes even if people don't have the resources, they might be able to say, well, I was part of this grant opportunity, and it was helpful for this. It might be something that you look at, that you might want to look at. So I think sometimes just making it known with what you need. And I mean, I can only imagine the challenges at a smaller institution, because I am not at a small institution, and it feels like we never really have enough. And I think what can be said is, for example, we have archivists that do some great work. Ellen Swain, as a student life and culture archivist, has done amazing work. But also, she is one person. And so that has been something where, by creating my position, I'm there to help a little bit, to fill in some of the things that, some people just can't always do. And likewise, now I'm getting more students who are able to help do some of the things that I can't fully do.
And I wonder if tapping into your alumni base would be helpful, because I think there's definitely a strong case to make for university archives and alumni, because when their reunions, their reunions come up, they always get nostalgic, and you can hit them in their heart and be like, well, if you give us stuff, you can come back and look at it in about 10 to 15 years. Yeah, and I know Princeton, our alumni base is very active and vocal and have very, very strong ties to their classes. And I know it's a little bit weird, but maybe having alumni to help be your advocates as well.
That's an excellent point to drive home as well, because I don't want to synthesize it to dollars, but the universities are always trying to tap their alumni for what money they can get out of them. So if they're seeing that you're creating a community with alumni members that they haven't been able to previously tap, or with community members that they truly have strong relationship with already, and they're seeing that they are like giving glow up to the university archives, they're like, oh my gosh, what is university archives doing? We need to pay attention. So alumni support, I agree, is critical, and I think to getting your voice heard.
Well, thank you so much. I'm gonna just put a call out for if there's another question, lingering question for anybody. Well then, no one's typing.
Going once, going twice.
Well, I will just ask everyone to share their gratitude to Valencia, Jessica, and Lae'l. Thank you so much for sharing, for giving us your time, your expertise, and sharing all about the wonderful, phenomenal work you've been doing. Thank you so much for being here. I will say, I'll plug next month's webinar, which is using primary sources in instruction. So that will be in June. And yeah, everyone, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Angel.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to us.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording.